source more in terms of how it's dividing up noir. I'm looking a little bit towards noir also as of late. I found a key sentence here that says, LA in this instance, of course, is standing for capitalism in general. Let's see. It has come to play the double role of utopia and dystopia for advanced capitalism. Now, economics is not necessarily like a main focus I want to focus on for this project, but that's a pretty significant sentence in terms of how it's dividing up the city, utopia and dystopia. Certain spaces, certain genres are depicting either utopia or dystopia, and certain time periods, how they're kind of differentiating what they're showing. Like, for example, I kind of mapped out certain films, certain groupings of films, what decade they were released and what genre they fall in, and how they depict how they're depicted in Los Angeles. So, for example, on like one end, I have neo-noir stuff like Mulholland Drive or LA Confidential, and you can say that to a degree they're showing both utopic or dystopic spaces, but they're also, since they're released either in the 90s or 2000s, they're kind of like showing LA in a classic or fetishized manner, if that makes sense. And on one end, yep, the total other end, you have something like Blade Runner, which is total dystopia. It's not fetishized or idealized, but it's still heavily stylized, showing both like a noir inflection and a dystopic inflection. So, but one could also say it's fetishized in how we perceive like a dystopic space. You know, you can say that for Blade Runner, and if you're looking at New York, you say it's Escape from New York. But also somewhere in these like gray areas in the middle, yet like I know I said this last time, you have something like Repo Man and They Live, which are ambiguous spaces. One could say it's not even LA. Well, Repo Man you can. They have that scene where they have this car chase and it looks like Grease, and they have the Terminator 2 car chase sequences. So that's kind of like an outlier scene. But other than that, it's kind of unusual. And it's sort of ambiguous ways. I'm going to explore those spaces versus polarized, either fetishized or idealized, bracketed spaces. And I know there was a couple other films I wanted to look at, like Falling Down, in terms of how they. For me, Falling Down is a pretty unusual film. It shows like LA, like, and these films are totally different, but it shows LA like how Do the Right Thing shows New York as like this crisis of multiculturalism and just a powder keg waiting to get set off. But it shows. I don't know if I'm going about this all right, but I'm sort of placing that in between like neo-noir and this ambiguous space, so it's like kind of to the left, and on the other end you have Terminator 2, in between like dystopic and ambiguous. So, but other than that, I've been gathering a lot of sources in terms of articles on the films, articles on genre, articles on postmodern LA and urbanism and architecture. So I have a lot of kind of reference and starting points, but and the next step is just going face first and doing research.
Can you tell us a little more about fetishization or versus idealization?
Mm-hmm. I guess we'll use Mulholland as an example, because LA Confidential doesn't seem to have this kind of like duality per se. It's just kind of like a 90s take on like, it's like a 90s take on noir, but it's stuck in this certain aspect of looking in retrospect on how these like stylized inflections and how it's affecting the city. But Mulholland Drive seems to have this weird, like, nostalgic look at the city, at the space of LA, across different like set pieces. So it's idealized and fetishized, but it's like in that aspect it's rooted from like nostalgia and its critique of like LA as a city of disillusionment, given the failed actress, and it's like stuck in the space. So you have like idealization and nostalgia, but also like I don't know, there's a sort of irony, we were discussing this the other day in Over's class, when we were watching Blue Velvet, and just having a broad discussion with Lynch, where we were talking about whether Blue Velvet was a nostalgic film or was it like satiric? Pastiche. So to me, that struck me as kind of interesting. I see similar aspects in Mulholland Drive. I think I just danced around the question.
No, that's pretty good. Well, I mean, it turns out, right, that if one's when I'm in an optimistic mood, speaking for myself, which happens, and I want to think well of David Lynch's movies, even if I don't particularly want to think well of David Lynch for various reasons. Then it's pastiche or it's critical, and the characters, like the goodness of the characters who are supposed to be good are undermined by the patent falseness of the Robin that functions as or whatever but it's a Robin, right? Yeah. That functions as the emblem for the happy ending and stuff like that. But then I think for a lot of audiences, even sort of like people who ought to be, and I don't use this term judgmentally, but like cynical hipsters, right? They take that ending as a happy ending, and they think that Kyle MacLachlan and Laura Dern, it's Laura Dern, right? So that couple is like they're good, and you know, and Frank is bad, right? And kind of like, whereas you could read all the sort of falseness or ostentatious stylization of the film as kind of dismantling, like Lumberton. It's Lumberton, is that the name of the town? That town is obviously like a fake town, and that fakeness should be associated with the fakeness of that mode of life, right? Mm-hmm. But it doesn't play that way. So I was interested because in the distinction between idealization and fetishization, because you said that, which I think is right, that in Blade Runner, dystopia, all the dystopian mise-en-scène is heavily fetishized. Right, so it's not idealized, right? It's dystopian, but there's this kind of psychic investment that the film both has as a system and solicits from its audiences, that kind of these empty spaces, right, and the depopulated spaces of kind of messed up Los Angeles where you wouldn't really want to live are pretty cool, right? And sort of escape from New York, totally. I mean, like, nobody wants to live in concentration camp, prison, New York, but look at those outfits and stuff, right? Or like, what's that guy's name? Sebastian, right? What are the initials? Is it the same as Bach's initials? I always forget. Anyways, huh? J.R. Sebastian, whatever. But you know who I mean, right? So the guy who makes his own sort of friends and pets, who there's that long scene with Pris, and his apartment is made to look as if it's in this famous building, the Bradbury Building, and so on. That those kind of living teddy bear synthetic friends that he makes that sing home again, like they're really alluring, right? And we kind of, I mean, the audiences tend to fixate on that, and even like the, you know, just unpleasant stuff, like the guy who makes eyes, right? The eye specialist who discloses Terrell's address to Roy. Like, that's kind of like, even though, you know, it's really cold in the room and stuff, you're like in this kind of boy geek way. It's like, whoa, he's making an eye, right? So
there seems to also be humanity in those scenes, which is lacking throughout the film.
Right.
People actually doing something.
Right. So part of it is labor.
Yeah. Labor at their own accord to some degree.
But that's just, I think in general the problem of dystopias is interesting because you can fetishize something that's precisely not an ideal, right? It's not. Mm-hmm. It's something awful, but it's alluring. Yeah, sure. No, wait, but sorry, you just look so ready to go, Andy. Let me ask you one more question, and then have other people talk to you a little bit. So what kind of set of problems does this project, that you're already interested, like, why are you doing this? Not that you shouldn't be doing it, I'm just interested.
I guess I don't feel like I'm necessarily biting off more than I can chew, but right now it's, before I kind of start, well, I've started, before I get really deep into research, I'm sort of doing my own preliminary kind of categorizations. And I know that'll change once I get into the research, so right now it's, the most important thing to know is that it's an active process and things will change.
But aside the fact that I kind of bullied you guys and said you have to choose a city by the beginning of second week, right? Why did you choose LA and the sort of dystopic end of film set in LA? Like it's not Steve Martin's I Love LA, or is that what that movie is called, with roller skates? Huh?
Yeah.
LA Story, right, there we go. Thank you.
Well, I was,
But that, I mean, am I remembering right? It's basically celebratory of Los Angeles
yeah, I
living,
think so.
and in that way they even Curb Your Enthusiasm, which pretends to hate LA, is a big commercial for LA in some way, right?
well, when I was thinking about which city, I was going back and forth between LA and New York, but I knew I wanted to focus on LA, given specifically films like, and this will probably be the central point of my papers, They Live and Repo Man, because they seem to take place in this odd gray area of space, and it's like enhanced when he takes on the glasses. It's literally a gray area where they don't know what's going on. But and the more I thought about it, the more films that were kind of springing up, whether it was a different genre or a different time period, something like so the fact that I can draw some parallels or make a claim, make a statement in this paper about a broad grouping of films that are kind of all saying some things, whether it's contradictory or not, like just polarized films, all showing space and
Where does your interest in polarization?
I don't know, but I know it's there and it's igniting this field.
Think about where it comes from, maybe. That might be illuminating. What, other people?